March 1989. Mountain Studios, Montreux, Freddie Mercury had been working late into the night on vocal arrangements for what would eventually become The Miracle, a working pattern that had become increasingly common across the album's extended recording process. Freddie apparently finding that the quiet hours after midnight offered a specific kind of privacy and concentration that the studios more populated. Daytime sessions rarely allowed. Mary Austin has described, in the limited interviews where this particular night has come up, receiving a telephone call at her London residence at approximately 3 a.m, a call that woke her from sleep and that she initially assumed, based on the sheer improbability of the hour, must involve some kind of emergency requiring immediate attention. What she found instead, according to her account, was Freddie's voice, calm rather than urgent, carrying a specific quality she has struggled across the years to fully characterize, something between exhaustion and a particular kind of clarity that late-night hours sometimes produce in people working through difficult, creative, or emotional material. Freddie apologized, according to Mary's recollection, for the hour, acknowledging immediately that he understood he was waking her, but explained that he needed to speak with her specifically, that whatever had prompted the call could not wait until a more reasonable time, a specific insistence that Mary has said told her, even before Freddie said anything else, that this conversation carried unusual weight. Mary has described the conversation's opening as somewhat disjointed, Freddie apparently working through several different threads of thought before settling into whatever had actually prompted the 3 a.m. call, discussing briefly the specific vocal arrangement he had been working through in the studio before the conversation shifted, according to Mary's account, toward considerably more personal territory. He said he'd been sitting alone in the control room. Mary has recounted, in the version of this description that has appeared most consistently across her limited public statements about this night, just him and the tape, playing back the same 8 bars over and over. And somewhere in there, he'd started thinking about things that had nothing to do with the song at all. And he said he needed to tell someone before the feeling passed, before he talked himself out of it the way he sometimes did with things that felt too big to say out loud in daylight. What Freddie apparently needed to say, according to Mary's careful and limited public account, involved a specific acknowledgement of regret, not the broad, general regret about mortality or lost time that had characterized various other documented conversations from this general period of his life, but something considerably more particular, connected, according to Mary's characterization, to a specific choice or pattern of choices Freddie had made across his career that he found himself, at 3 a.m. in an empty Montreux control room, suddenly and urgently needing to examine aloud. Mary has never specified, across any interview where this night has come up, the exact substance of what Freddie identified as his regret, offering only the general characterization that it involves something about how much of himself he'd given to the wrong people over the years, and how little time he felt he'd had left over for the people who actually mattered. She has said that she listened, primarily across the majority of the call's duration, understanding, from the specific quality of Freddie's voice and from her own many years of friendship with him, that this was a conversation requiring her presence and attention considerably more than it required her active participation or advice. A role Mary has described occupying across numerous similar conversations throughout her decades-long friendship with Freddie. The specific and well-practiced capacity to simply receive whatever he needed to voice without attempting to solve or redirect it. Freddie's tone, according to Mary's account, shifted across the conversation's roughly 40-minute duration, moving from what she has described as a kind of raw, unguarded vulnerability in its opening portions towards something calmer and more settled as the call progressed. A pattern Mary has said she recognized from other difficult conversations across their friendship. Freddie apparently finding, through the specific act of voicing difficult feelings aloud to someone he trusted completely, a kind of relief that allowed him to arrive, by the conversation's end, at a considerably more peaceful state than the one in which he had begun it. The specific timing of this call, occurring during the extended and often difficult recording process for The Miracle, an album that would eventually be released in May 1989 and that biographers have since come to understand as marking a specific and significant shift in how Freddie approached his creative work following his AIDS diagnosis roughly 18 months earlier, has led people who have studied this fragment of testimony to connect it to a broader pattern documented across various accounts from this general period. Freddie apparently experiencing periodic and unpredictable waves of emotional processing related to his diagnosis that surfaced, according to multiple separate testimonies from different people in his circle, at unexpected moments rather than following any predictable or manageable schedule. Roger Taylor has referenced. In a separate and independently sourced interview addressing this general period of the miracle sessions, a broader pattern of Freddie sometimes working through the deepest hours of the night on material that seemed to carry more emotional weight than its musical content alone might suggest. A pattern that, while not specifically confirming Mary's particular account of this exact call, offers a degree of corroborating context suggesting that late-night, emotionally intense working sessions were not unusual for Freddie during this specific period of the band's history. Mary has said that she offered, near the conversation's end, to fly to Montreux the following day, an offer she has described Freddie declining gently but firmly, explaining, according to her account, that he didn't need her physical presence, that the conversation itself, the simple act of having spoken everything aloud to someone who genuinely understood him, had accomplished exactly what he had needed accomplished. What Mary has described as the conversation's most significant moment, occurring, according to her account, in its final minutes before Freddie ended the call, involved a specific promise Freddie apparently extracted from her, though she has characterized this less as a formal request, comparable to some of the more explicitly structured private instructions Freddie gave to various people across his final years, and more as a quieter, more informal understanding reached between two people who had known each other for the better part of 2 decades by that point. He asked me to remind him, Mary has said, in the limited public account she has offered of this specific detail, whenever I thought he needed reminding, exactly what he'd told me that night, because he was worried he'd forget it again in the daylight, go back to whatever pattern had made him need to call at 3 in the morning in the first place. He said something like, "You're the only person who can say it to me and have me actually hear it. Because you've never wanted anything from me except for me to be happy. And everyone else, even the people who love me most, they want something too. Even if it's just for me to keep being who I've always been for them." This particular characterization, Freddie apparently distinguishing Mary's specific relationship to him from every other relationship in his life, based on the absence of any competing want or expectation, has been cited, among people who study the broader pattern of Freddie's documented relationships across his life, as consistent with the well-established and extensively corroborated understanding of Mary Austin's unique position within his personal history, a friendship that survived and, according to numerous separate accounts, arguably deepened following the end of their earlier romantic relationship, precisely because it had transformed into something that Freddie apparently experienced as free from the specific complications and expectations that characterized so many of his other relationships across a career built substantially on public performance and public consumption of his private self. Mary has said, across the limited interviews where she has addressed this night, that she did, in fact, remind Freddie of this conversation on at least one subsequent occasion, though she has never specified the exact circumstances or timing of that later reminder, offering only the general acknowledgement that she honored the specific request Freddie made during that 3 in the morning call, understanding it as one of the smaller but genuinely meaningful responsibilities Freddie entrusted to her across the years of their friendship. Distinct from, but connected to the more extensively documented and considerably larger responsibilities she would eventually carry regarding his funeral arrangements and the eventual disposition of his ashes. The specific content of what Freddie identified as his regret during that night, the particular pattern of giving himself to the wrong people that he apparently felt he needed to examine aloud, has never been more precisely specified in any account Mary has given, and researchers who have attempted to draw connections between this fragmentary testimony and other more thoroughly documented aspects of Freddie's personal and professional relationships across his career have generally proceeded with considerable caution, understanding that Mary's own careful and deliberately limited public characterization of the conversation appears designed specifically to protect its most personal content while still acknowledging, in general terms, that the conversation occurred and that it carried genuine significance within the broader arc of their friendship. What makes this particular fragment of testimony distinct from other similarly structured accounts of Freddie's private late-night reflections is the specific and unusual detail of its precise timing, 3 a.m, a detail that Mary has confirmed with more consistency and more specificity than she has offered regarding the conversation's actual content, suggesting that the hour itself carried a kind of significance for her that exceeded even the significance of whatever Freddie actually said. The recognition that a person calling at exactly that hour, rather than at midnight or at dawn, communicates something specific about the particular quality of insomnia and unguarded reflection that apparently characterized this period of Freddie's creative process during the miracle sessions. Brian May has offered, in at least one separate interview addressing the general working atmosphere of these sessions, an observation that aligns coherently with this broader pattern. Describing Freddie during this period as someone who seemed to be working through something considerably larger than any individual song, a specific and sustained process of reckoning that Brian has characterized as visible in Freddie's general demeanor throughout the recording process, even when its specific content remained, as it apparently did for Brian, as much as for anyone else outside Freddie's most immediate confidence, largely private and unshared. The broader significance of this particular story, beyond its specific and largely unverifiable central content, lies in what it suggests about the particular texture of Freddie Mercury's internal life during a period, 1988 and 1989, that has generally received less detailed biographical attention than his more extensively documented final months in 1991, a period during which Freddie was managing his diagnosis privately, continuing to create at a demanding professional level, and apparently, according to this and several other fragmentary accounts from the same general time frame, experiencing periodic and unpredictable waves of emotional processing that surfaced most intensely during exactly the kind of quiet, unguarded hours that a 3 a.m. telephone call to the one person he apparently trusted to receive it without wanting anything additional from him in return represents. Mary Austin has continued, across more than 3 decades since Freddie's death, to protect the specific content of this conversation with the same careful discretion she has extended to nearly every other piece of private testimony entrusted to her across her decades-long friendship with Freddie, offering the world enough to understand that the conversation mattered, that it revealed something genuine about Freddie's internal experience during a difficult and creatively demanding period of his life, while withholding the specific details that she has apparently judged belong entirely to the particular trust Freddie extended to her at 3 a.m. in March 1989, when he needed, urgently and specifically, to speak to the one person in his life he understood wanted absolutely nothing from him except his own genuine happiness,